Audio Jungle.
Welcome text. It opens up this content box, and you'll see these content boxes in numerous places across the site. But here we were looking at the welcome text, and it's this text here, right? So you don't have to know HTML, you don't have to be a wizard. If you just wanted to make a simple change, we've taken away the exclamation marks here, and we wanted to do it under English. If we wanted to make the same change in a different language, it's the same process. You just edit the content box, and immediately it is updated on the portal. And when we're ready and we've made all those changes, we would click yes, and it would publish those up to the website. So it's very easy for us to correct things like language translations that maybe need tweaking. If the guys at corporate want to change the login options, you've seen how we removed at DIRA the social options. So for us, the way to change the social options, in this example, we've got Instagram. If we wanted to take Instagram away, we would just come on here, we click enable on Instagram, and it disappears straight away. And then we would just publish. It's a very simple, straightforward process to do it. And in all of these social options, it always gives us, what information is available. So for Facebook here, we can see that these fields are available from Facebook at the moment. And you can choose whether you store that information into our system here. So email, we want to keep email because we want to use it. If you wanted to keep gender, right, we could choose gender, we could store that in gender, and then we can store it here. So it's very simple to make those changes. Some of the other functions that we have is the ability to display additional content. So for example, if we wanted some way to put a little advertising message maybe about something special that's going on at a property, and you don't want to get into designing things in HTML, then you can enable additional content. Maybe it's for a promotion that's happening in the property that day or over the weekend, or some special news that you want to communicate. What we can do, I've just typed in additional content here, and it just makes it populate at the top of the login page, so you can make sure that it's seen by as many people as possible. So really simple. You could just give access to the marketing guys to be able to update these messages really simply, and it disappears again, right? And again, if you want to do that in multiple languages, in this example, right, this is English. If I wanted to change it in Norwegian, I would just type in the Norwegian text. My Norwegian's not so good, so I'll cheat a little bit. But right, it's very simple to handle the multiple languages. We've also have the option to set up redirect URLs. Let me go back into link domain. So this is for a post-authentication setup, right? So after authentication, when somebody is registered and they've gone through the registration process, we can choose what we do with that individual user. And in this example, we're just saying, okay, well, let's just redirect them to a custom URL. We set in here the URL, but there are different options here, right? We have something called a status page. So if we use a status page in conjunction with the MAC address welcome back, then we can present a user with a status page and then send them onto a redirect URL. And then I guess a good example would be on a status page here, would be we could have a message that just says welcome back. See how we can use guest data to present this message back to the users. So in this example, if we set this up for DIRA and we had the MAC address re-authentication tick box ticked, then instead of seeing the registration page, the registration portal page, because we've already collected their information, we know who they are, these guys would get a welcome back page, and it would just say welcome back, whatever we decide we want to put in there. We can use their first name if we have their first name, and then it would redirect them onto the DIRA unique page on the Mine Hotels website. So that's a pretty useful and clever feature that we like. And we'll talk more about status pages later and how we can target those to individual groups of users. And then you'll see at the bottom here again this tag. So this portal is tagged to the site Avani Dira, so that we know we have a network set up, we know we have a portal, and the final thing that we need for these site to be complete is to make sure that, let's have a look here, for each of these registration methods, so for Facebook, let's have a look at Facebook, it's disabled here, but we have to choose a service tier, right? A service tier is the type of experience that the user will get, how much bandwidth they will be allocated, which QoS tier they're on, how often they should relog in, that kind of thing. So let's have a look at these service tiers now. So here we go. So we're filtered and we're looking at the Avani Dira site, and in this example they've got a few different service tiers set up. So we have service tiers for GHA, email, social media login, and we'll use social media login just because I know that I'm not using it, so it won't cause any problems. But for each of these service tiers, each different type of experience that you need to offer or want to offer to your guests in your hotels, then we have these decisions to make, or these levers that we can use to define that experience. So we have to give it a name. If any of the locations are charging, we have to choose a price. We choose the currency, and then we can start making these decisions. So usually, the main one that we use is the bandwidth speed, right? We choose how much bandwidth speed, megabits a second, kilobits a second, we want to provide this particular user group. So bandwidth up, bandwidth down is the obvious one. We can also, in some locations, we have this deployed in areas where maybe they're using satellite broadband, maybe on oil rigs or shipping, and they want to charge users for the volume of data or cap a volume of data, like a cellular phone contract. So maybe we charge $50 and give people 1 gig of data, and once they burn through that data, then it'll prompt them to purchase another package of data. So it's really flexible. I don't think we've come across a scenario, an experience type that we can't configure using these elements here. And you'll note that most of them work on the basis of radius attributes. So you'll see the kind of things that we're setting here. It's either whisper protocols. You'll see these are the actual commands that go through to the gateways on site. And the gateways are really powerful. We've got a really fantastic API integration with the gateways that are on site. And this is really incredibly accurate and fast at applying these limits and tracking them. So we have the service tiers set up, and then we can allocate these service tiers to the different login types on the portal experience, right? So in this example, we have PMS login, so we're giving them 8x8. We have some voucher code, internet code set up, a 4 meg and an 8 meg. So I guess these are being charged for maybe at the property level, or maybe it's bundled as part of the conference service. And then we have a whitelist and a blacklist, and we'll talk a little bit more about whitelisting and blacklisting devices shortly. But they're the fundamentals. So we've covered off the 3 things, right? So there'll be the network devices. So in the case of Miner, we've got the 2 gateways on site. We can also do this natively on some wireless LAN controllers. Just for information, things like Meraki, the Ruckus, they all have a capability of an external captive portal within the wireless LAN controller, and we can use those vendors to deploy the captive portal. Some of that have better capability than others, so that's why we choose to deploy a gateway on site that's really fully supports all of the features. So we need the network, we need the portal design, which we've talked through, and we need the service tiers, which grant the different types of experience. So they're the kind of fundamental elements of the system. So I think now we'll move on to that question, probably from earlier, where we're looking at actually, okay, well, what do we know about what's going on now on the site, right? And typically that means, okay, well, what sessions are we seeing? Who's connected? Who's not connected? And what do we know about those users? So I've come into sessions, and session information gives me detail of who is connected on the network and what was the start time of their session. So I think I have this sorted in the right time. The 26th, 28th, 27th. Here we go. Yeah, so the last connection here was a GHA login on the test access point, and it was me yesterday. So let's have a look, see what we know about me. Because I wasn't on site, we're not going to tell me an awful lot, actually. So let's go over to the test domain where I know there's lots of good information. So, depending on the kind of setup that we have at the property and what information we're pulling through from PMS, so for each session then we'll get a bunch of information. And if we click on an individual user session, we'll get presented with this additional screen which tells us information that you'll see on the screen here. So we get information about the tier that they've been connected to, when they were last seen, whether they're online right now, and what guest data we may have collected about this particular session user. We've also got these tabs across the top, and we can see which devices are associated with this session time, this group. And in this example, we have a customer who has connected a smartphone and a desktop, right? And you'll recognize this information. It's part of the info that we pull back and display on that front dashboard page. So we get MAC address of the device. We know what kind of device it is roughly. We know when it was last seen. We then move across, and depending on what's going on or how long they've been with us, we'll start to see other bits of information about, where were they connected, how long ago was it, when did their session start and when did it end, and for how long did it go on. And we'll see things like, well, how much data has been downloaded. So this is the test site, so we see some data about, in this session they downloaded 219 megabytes. If we have charging in place, we can see how many purchases have taken place, right? So if they've purchased, chargeable packages, 10 over a period of time, we'll be able to see when that took place here, and the method, right? Did it go through PayPal? Was it being charged to the bedroom? And from a security and a data protection point of view, we want to log how have they accepted the terms of use, right? When did they accept the terms of use? So if we get any queries about, okay, well, why did you send me this email? Or, I want to know what you're using my data for. And we'll be able to say, well, look, you accepted these terms and conditions on this particular date. So it keeps everybody honest and legal. And we can also see okay, I'll cover that in just a second when we come back to it. So at the moment we're talking about individual kind of logins, individual sessions associated with kind of self-registration. But I'll come on to the concept of accounts, which is very similar, but accounts can be these groups of users grouped together. So we'll come on to accounts in a second, and it is just as flexible. But just to finish off here, from a support perspective, you can you can navigate using this sessions list. You can filter. Let me just grab a MAC address. If we had a MAC address of a device that we wanted to find from a support perspective, then we can search for a MAC address here, and it'll show up in the list. Then we can go in and troubleshoot this device. We can say, okay, well, yeah, I can see that you're connected, I can see that you're using data, but you're not having a great experience. So let's override for this particular user. Maybe the CEO's arrived, or Mike's arrived in the hotel. You want to give him a great experience. Let's give him 300 megabits a second bandwidth, and it's going to override it for this individual user group's devices, so it'll immediately give them an update. And that is important, right? One of the features or functions that we need to make that happen is access to write back to the gateway. So there needs to be some port forwarding set up so that we can access the gateway. But if that's done, and Marlon will be confirming that with you guys when he gets the information from you if he hasn't already, but these changes will be immediately updated back on this particular account for this user, which is pretty neat. The other thing that we can do from here, let me just filter this out, is you'll notice if I have a site selected, and we might have to do that on the live site actually. If we have a site selected here in the top right hand side, we can access something called a pending user list. So in the example here, a pending user would be a user that has connected to the SSID but has not yet authenticated. So maybe they have a restriction on their device where they can't see the captive portal, or maybe it's a smart TV and they can't get it connected but you know the MAC address. Then you would see a list of MAC addresses here, and you'd be able to click on them, connect them and assign them to a service tier so that those devices can be connected. So if you're doing it from support perspective, select the site, click on the pending user, find the MAC address, and then you can connect them. If a customer has advised you in advance, or you've got a bunch of 50 smart TVs that you want to assign to onto the network, then we'd associate that or tackle that in a slightly different way. So Manoj, I've seen your question. I'll come back to that in a second. So accounts is what we would typically call internet codes or voucher codes, right? So if we had, let's go back in here. If we wanted to create a login for a group of users, whether that is maybe a conference or an event, or it is you know, a group of smart TVs, or maybe you want to assign it for a group of housekeeping, you know, smartphone devices that they're using internally, and you want to group those users together so you can manage them, monitor them, make sure that they're not using too much bandwidth or things like that. So this is how we would manage it through accounts. So it's very similar. You can create an account. Let's use the example of maybe we have an event taking place. So I'm going to create this username. On this site we need a password, but actually on the minor domain it's just an internet code without a password. We choose the service tier that we want to associate this meeting with. So you can see here I've got a service tier that's set as conference 1 day. So let's do that. Let's create a Mercedes event, and it's going to be a conference 1 day associated with 3 megabytes. So you can see then that I get this account created, and I can then go in and edit it, right? So if this device, if this account, let's say they're going to have 30 smart TVs, and I've got a list of CSV list of devices, then I can just upload those into the system, or I can do it one by one, right? And track, you know, that device in here. So I can add that in, and that means it'll get connected straight away without any captive portal being displayed, and it'll be straight onto the network. And then immediately I can see, you know, when that device comes online, I'll be able to see how many sessions, the bandwidth associated with it. And I could also use this service tier override here, right? So we decided at the beginning that we were going to associate them with the 3 meg conference tier, right? And these are this is what I guess these numbers that are seen that are kind of shaded out at the back. So if we make no changes, then this is going to be available 24 hours from when they first log in. But maybe we know that the Mercedes event is just going to be with us for 1 day on the 29th of March. So let's set it so that it only works on the 29th of March. Simultaneous use. We could say actually, okay, well, we know there are going to be 100 delegates, but we don't want more than 200 devices to be connected at one time. That's one of the limitations we've set. Or actually, the way that we've solved the Wi-Fi is if we've said that, okay, you've bought access, but you've only bought access for 30 devices. The first 30 devices that connect will be the 30 devices that are allowed on the network. So you could set a device limit. You can override the bandwidth. So maybe the guys at Mercedes have said, well, look, I need 50 megabits a second because we're doing live streaming of something. And you say, okay, great. Well, I can give you 50 megabits a second across this network. And all those devices have access to 50 meg. You can set volume exactly the same. You can set it to be dropped on a specific VLAN. If you've got quality of service being managed via VLAN, you want to make sure that those paid customers have a much better experience, right? You can drop it onto a specific VLAN. The other thing we can do is we can use something on the microtics that give us a quality of service called a microtic mark, and we can prioritize that traffic.